Do not be afraid. It's one of the most repeated phrases in the Bible, but have you ever asked why the first thing angels say when they appear is always a command, not to be terrified? It's strange, isn't it? You'd think a divine being, a messenger of light and purity, would bring comfort. Instead, their presence brings paralyzing fear. And that fear isn't just human superstition. It might be something much deeper, because across every culture, every religion, every ancient text, whenever something not quite human appears, the first reaction is always the same: terror. And maybe, just maybe, they say do not be afraid, not because they're gentle, but because what we're seeing is something the human mind was never meant to comprehend. Tonight, we're going to explore the terrifying reason angels always say those words, not as symbols of faith, but as psychological and metaphysical phenomena. What if angels aren't what we think they are? What if their light is not just divine, but blinding? Because when you strip away the holy imagery, the wings, the halos, the white robes, what remains is something much older than religion, something that lurks at the edge of consciousness itself, the human confrontation with the sublime. That mixture of awe and horror that shatters the limits of our understanding. And if we're being honest, fear is the only rational reaction to something infinite. Because infinity doesn't care if you understand it, maybe angels say do not be afraid, because fear is the only thing standing between you and madness. In this episode, we'll go beyond scripture. We'll step into the psychology of fear, the philosophy of the divine, and the ancient stories that hint at truths humanity was never ready to face. By the end, you'll see why those 4 simple words, do not be afraid, are less a comfort and more a warning. Welcome to the unseen world. When we hear the word angel, most of us picture something beautiful, a winged being in white, soft light, a gentle smile. But the truth is, that image is a lie of comfort. Because in the ancient world, angels weren't painted as serene or human-like. They were monstrous, beyond the limits of human form, beyond the structure of sanity. In the book of Ezekiel, an angel, a cherub, is described with 4 faces, one of a man, one of a lion, one of an ox, and one of an eagle. Its body is covered in eyes. It moves without turning, gliding in every direction at once. Wheels within wheels, burning with fire. And when the prophet saw it, he didn't fall to his knees in worship. He collapsed, shaking, unable to look directly at it. The first words the being spoke were, "Fear not." Think about that for a moment. This isn't a being from a child's picture book. This is a cosmic force so alien, so radiant, that even the most faithful are struck by terror in its presence. And yet, this reaction isn't unique to the Bible. In nearly every ancient text, divine messengers cause the same psychological rupture. The Sumerians wrote of shining beings whose very voice drove men insane. The Greeks spoke of gods whose true forms could kill mortals who gazed upon them. Even in modern UFO encounters, witnesses describe blinding light, paralysis, and a feeling that time itself has broken. It's as if the human brain short-circuits when it meets something that exists outside its natural frame of reference. Modern psychology has a word for this, the numinous, a term coined by Rudolf Otto to describe that eerie mix of fascination and fear we feel in the presence of something vast, powerful, and unknowable. It's not simple fear, like the fear of death or pain. It's existential. It has the dread of realizing you re-standing before something that should not fit inside your reality, and yet it does. Do not be afraid, the angel says, but your body doesn't listen. Because deep down, your nervous system recognizes the truth. You'll pray, standing before something infinite. This is where theology meets psychology. Ancient writers didn't describe these reactions because they were primitive or superstitious. They were describing a real, neurological collapse. The moment your mind confronts the unfathomable, the self, that fragile illusion of control, begins to disintegrate. And maybe that's the real reason angels speak those words. Not to comfort you, but to stabilize you, to keep your consciousness from shattering completely. Every record of divine encounter, from prophets to mystics, follows the same sequence: light, terror, speech, and then silence. It's as if the human brain can only hold that experience for a few moments before retreating into disbelief. But if these beings aren't merely symbolic, if they are truly what the ancients described, then the question becomes unavoidable: what exactly are they? Fear, at its core, is not an enemy. It's a teacher, a mirror that shows us the edges of what we are capable of understanding. When angels say, "Do not be afraid," they are not dismissing fear. They are acknowledging it. They know what they look like to us. They know what their presence does to the human mind. Because in that moment, fear becomes the only bridge between our world and theirs. To understand this, we have to think of fear not as an emotion, but as a philosophical event. The German philosopher Immanuel Kant described something called the sublime, an experience so vast, so overwhelming, that it both terrifies and exalts you. Standing on a cliff, staring at the infinite sea, looking up at a sky full of stars and realizing how small you are. In those moments, you feel awe and dread at the same time, because your mind cannot hold both the immensity and your own fragility. An angelic encounter is the ultimate form of the sublime. You are standing before something that should not exist, yet does. Something both beautiful and unbearable. The human mind seeks pattern, symmetry, familiarity. When it meets something that exceeds those boundaries, it breaks the logic that holds reality together. That's why people faint, shake, or fall to their knees. It's not a lack of faith. It's the collapse of reason in the face of infinity. And maybe that's the true definition of the divine, the moment when reason no longer protects you. Every ancient culture knew this truth, in their own way. The Greeks feared to look upon the gods. The Hebrews covered their faces before the ark. The mystics of the East meditated in darkness, seeking to dissolve the ego entirely. Because to touch the infinite directly, without fear, would mean losing everything you are. So when an angel says, "Do not be afraid," it's not a reassurance. It's a command to hold your form, to resist being dissolved by what you're witnessing. Fear is the last thread keeping you tethered to yourself. Without it, you'd disappear into the vastness, absorbed by something far greater than comprehension. In this way, angels are not messengers in the simple sense. They are thresholds, the living borders between the finite and the infinite, between what the human soul can bear and what lies beyond endurance. Their presence exposes the ultimate truth of existence, that fear and awe are not opposites, but twins born from the same realization, that you are staring into eternity, and eternity is staring back. When angels say, "Do not be afraid," what they really mean is, do not lose yourself. For thousands of years, people have claimed to see them. In deserts, in temples, in bedrooms at 3 a.m. different places, different times, yet the stories remain eerily similar: blinding light, an overwhelming presence, and a voice that speaks not to your ears, but directly into your mind. Do not be afraid. We like to believe those encounters belong to the ancient world, prophets and mystics who lived in ages of miracles. But the truth is, they never stopped. In the 20th and 21st centuries, psychologists, scientists, and paranormal researchers have recorded hundreds of cases of angelic encounters, many of them identical to the descriptions found in Scripture, only stripped of religious language. People report paralysis, radiant beings without faces, a feeling that time is frozen, that space is bending, that something vast is observing them. Some call them angels, others call them extraterrestrials. Some simply call them the light. But what if these are not separate phenomena? What if the divine, the alien, and the psychological are simply different languages, describing the same incomprehensible encounter? Because no matter what name you give it, the pattern never changes. Human perception breaks down. The experience becomes unspeakable, and fear, the primal, soul-deep terror, returns. There's a case from 1983. A woman in rural Texas reported waking to a brilliant light flooding her room. She couldn't move. She couldn't breathe. Then she heard a voice inside her head say, "Do not be afraid. I have always been here." The light vanished. Her clock read the same minute it had when she first woke. She described the feeling afterward as holy, but also said she never wanted to experience it again. Her psychiatrist noted that her story matched dozens of near-death experiences almost word for word. In another report, a pilot flying over the Pacific in 1950 radioed that his cockpit had filled with blinding light. He described seeing a human shape made of fire and wings. The voice told him, "Do not be afraid." Minutes later, his co-pilot confirmed the same thing, even though they both had their eyes closed. These accounts raise an uncomfortable question. Are we dealing with something real, or something that lives inside the architecture of the human mind? Carl Jung once said that humanity projects the unconscious onto the heavens, that what we call angels may be fragments of our own psyche made visible. But even Jung admitted something chilling. When enough people see the same impossible thing, it stops being a hallucination and becomes a manifestation. So perhaps angels appear not to us, but through us as reflections of consciousness itself, bleeding across dimensions. And maybe that's why their message never changes. Do not be afraid, because fear is the doorway, the vibration that opens the human mind just wide enough to glimpse them. But what are they trying to tell us? What truth lies behind that command, behind that impossible calm? Maybe the final answer isn't about them at all. Maybe it's about what happens to us when we see them. If you've noticed, every angelic encounter ends the same way it begins, with silence. The light fades, the voice disappears, the human is left trembling, unsure of what was real and what wasn't. But those who survive such moments, the prophets, the mystics, even the ordinary people who never asked to see, they all describe the same strange aftertaste. A feeling of having glimpsed something vast and terrible, and yet, somehow, beautiful. So what does "do not be afraid" truly mean? Maybe it's not a warning about them, maybe it's about us. Because fear is the one emotion that connects body, mind, and soul. It awakens you. It strips away illusion. It brings you face to face with what you truly are, a fragile consciousness floating in an endless void. When an angel says, "Do not be afraid," it's not telling you to erase that fear. It's asking you to stand within it, to remain conscious, to not run, not hide, not collapse into madness, to look directly at the infinite and stay human. In that moment, something profound happens. The human being and the divine being meet halfway, not as master and servant, but as mirrors of each other. Because what if angels are not separate entities at all? What if they are what human beings become when they remember what they truly are, when the soul sheds the weight of flesh, when consciousness expands beyond the body, and what's left is pure awareness, blazing like fire? If that's true, then fear is not the enemy of enlightenment. It's the gatekeeper, the final test before you can see the world as it truly is. The Sufi mystics called this state fana, annihilation of the self in divine presence. The Buddhists called it sunyata, emptiness that reveals the infinite, and the prophets simply called it the fear of God. Each of these paths begins in terror and ends in understanding. So when an angel says, "Do not be afraid," it isn't soothing you. It's inviting you to evolve, to let your fear transform from panic into awareness, from paralysis into surrender, because fear is only terrifying when you fight it. But when you accept it, when you let it pass through you, it becomes revelation. And perhaps that's why the ancient texts always describe angels with fire, light, and eyes that see everything. They are not creatures of comfort. They are embodiments of awareness itself, beings who see all things, and yet are untouched by them. To face them is to face yourself, the part of you that knows how small you are, and yet how infinite your spirit can become. So the next time you hear those words, in a dream, in a vision, or maybe whispered deep inside your thoughts. Remember, they are not saying, "Do not feel fear." They are saying, "Do not let fear destroy your understanding." Because fear is proof that you're standing at the threshold of something real. And on the other side of that fear is truth. Do not be afraid. You were meant to see. You've just listened to an exploration of one of humanity's oldest mysteries. If this opened your mind, share it with someone who's ready to look a little deeper into the light. And remember, some truths are not meant to comfort you, but to awaken you.